Hi, I'm Nader Sahuni.
And I'm Nancy Vitaco.
This is our third session of our program on social skills for student leaders. Today, we're going to be talking about deepening friendships. And the main ingredient for deeper friendships, as many of you already know, is vulnerability. When we share vulnerably in a way that feels appropriate to the moment, it generally deepens friendships. However, it's my experience that some people are either too vulnerable too quickly or hardly vulnerable at all. And if we're too vulnerable too quickly, it scares people away. And if we're never vulnerable, then we don't have deep friendships either. Nancy is going to tell us about a strategy to stay in the right range of vulnerability, to deepen friendships at the right pace and not scare people off.
There are a couple of things to watch for. First, be aware of how the other person's responding. Like, are they checking their phone while you're talking? Are they looking away? Do they look uncomfortable? Another important thing to notice is if they just listen and don't reciprocate or encourage you to keep going. If so, you should probably tone it down. On the other hand, you can look for positive signs that show that you're on the right track. Like, are they actually listening carefully? Are they nodding? Are they asking questions back? And most importantly, are they reciprocating by sharing something from their life that's similar in the level of vulnerability? One basic rule of thumb is to use a scale, a subjective scale in your mind, like 1 to 10, where 1 is hardly vulnerable, 10 is extremely vulnerable. You can initiate going deeper in a friendship by sharing something like at a level 2 or 3, and then watching to see if the other person shares something at maybe a 3 or a 4. If so, you can match them and keep going. Over time, the relationship develops a lot of depth and trust and connection. This takes place over time, too. It is not something that typically happens in one interaction. In the early stages of a friendship, expressing some feelings and concerns is important to take it beyond the superficial. On the other hand, you want to hold off on disclosing highly personal information, like anything traumatic or that could be really disturbing to hear.
Okay, before we get into the role play today, I want to share two things that we need to keep in mind. First, we've probably all experienced people who are talking at us nonstop, and that's never pleasant. It's really important to not go on and on when you're talking. There needs to be a balanced rhythm. After you share something, follow up with a related question that shows interest in the listener and draws them out. If you're aware of an area of need in their lives or an issue of concern that your friend has talked about, ask about it or express compassion. Generally speaking, others appreciate sensing that you're interested in their thoughts and feelings. Second, when I ask people in therapy about their relationships, and I ask them if they've told their spouse, for example, about a hard time they're having at work, they'll often say something about how they don't want to complain and make their spouse feel down. They don't want to be a downer. And that's well intentioned, and I appreciate that. But I often have to clarify what the difference is between complaining and being vulnerable. Complaining is reporting about bad circumstances, and that can become a downer after a while. But it's a very different story to share your feelings about something, especially if that sharing brings the other person closer into your inner world. So if I complain that taping a video with Nancy, for example, is never fun because she's always the star, that's complaining. But if I say that when I work with Nancy, I feel discouraged because I will never be able to catch up to her level of skill and knowledge, that's being vulnerable. All right, so that's my 2 cents. Now back to Nancy for the role play.
Let's pick up where we left off with the role play from last time. Let's assume this new friend that we've talked to in class did stop in to study together, and we've studied together 3 or 4 times now over the past couple of weeks. We've been having lunch with the same group, and I come in and I see you, Nader, looking at your phone at the table. Hey, Nader. Good to see you. How was Parents' Weekend? Did your folks come in town?
Yeah, it was pretty good. How about you?
My parents made the drive from Nebraska and got here in time for dinner. They took me to this awesome Italian place. I'd never be able to afford it. What'd you guys do?
Well, my parents drove up Saturday for lunch. They took me out to lunch.
During my dinner, my dad started telling me about how he and two of his brothers tried to go into medicine just like my grandfather did. He was a super successful doctor. My dad was like, "Oh, Gramps is going to be so proud of you, Nancy."
Yeah, I got an earful when they heard about my last chemistry exam.
Sounds like the conversation at lunch didn't go so well with your folks.
It was unpleasant. I wish they would lay off with all the pressure.
Man, I'm sorry it was such a hassle. Sounds like it really weighs on you.
Yeah, I could barely focus on the conversation. All I could hear was how unhappy they were with me.
I know it makes me feel like a real failure when my parents do that. Sometimes it's hard to shake the feeling sometimes. So hopefully you noticed how I was first of all sensitive to see if it was a good time to talk. Nader was on his phone at the beginning, so I didn't want to interrupt. It was only when he gave me his full attention that I started talking. I asked about Parents' Weekend, just a common thing I thought we could build on. No vulnerability yet. I noticed Nader didn't shut it down. He complained a little, so I noticed something about him. He was unhappy. So after I made some general chatter, I tested the waters by showing him care. I empathized and said it sounded like a pain. Then I asked him for more. When he shared more, then I took a small risk and asked about his feelings. When I said, "Hey, sounds like it weighs on you." After that, we were matching and increasing our level of vulnerability. And as you probably guessed, our friendship deepened as a result. So now, before we go on to your role play, I wanted to highlight a scripture from Galatians 5:2. Paul speaks to the church about carrying each other's burdens as a way to demonstrate how Christ wants us to live. When we're vulnerable with a friend about our needs and we respond to others' vulnerability with attention and care, we can develop friendships in the way that God designed.
So now it's your turn. Remember these 3 steps. Step 1, show a low level of vulnerability, like a level 1 or 2. And then step 2, observe to see if the vulnerability level is matched. And then step 3, continue sharing and observing in mutual incremental steps of vulnerability. So go ahead and pair up and try this role play. You're talking together about your parents. You can use the Parents' Weekend example or just talking about how parents feel about grades or some other topic. Speaker 1 will start talking about their parents and will try to take the relationship deeper, first by asking how Speaker 2 is doing with his or her parents. And then Speaker 2 will share a little bit about, without being vulnerable, maybe just a little complaining. And then Speaker 1 will show care and curiosity and ask for more. Speaker 2 will start to show some vulnerability, and then Speaker 1 will show even more vulnerability in response. So that's a total of 3 cycles. After you do it once, stop and share how it felt to be on either end of the conversation. Remember, use as much or as little of this tool as you need. You don't have to use all the steps, only the ones that will help you. Then switch roles, do it again. Use your own words, do it the way you feel most comfortable.